when I first started hearing of Agentforce projects and proof of concepts, a lot of them were scraping knowledge articles to present data to a customer, right? That was the initial. And now you're talking about Slack being able to answer questions to the complete user base internally. Where have things gone since the scraping knowledge? Like now with Agentforce as a platform, what are you seeing as use cases that are exciting in the ecosystem?
It's a really good question. It comes back to this really exciting idea that Andrej Karapathy has officially come on board saying, yeah, we should call it context engineering and not prompt engineering. A truth for anybody watching the show, right? Whether you are a CISO or a CTO, or whether you just want to get started playing with prompts. At the end of the day, two important things. No matter how much you are convinced that your LLM knows you, it does not. The API, every time it runs, is stateless. It doesn't remember a thing. It's a magnificent ball of maths, right? Truly beautiful. And we can get very philosophical about whether truth is beauty and beauty is truth. But for the purposes of this conversation, it has no memory. So any experience you have that makes you feel from typed sentence to typed sentence like there is continuity, that has been engineered. That is something we have built around the LLM, right? Even the very first experience with ChatGPT, that's a trick. And it's a trick based on the idea of taking what I call in some of the videos, the tape, right? That's basically what it is. It's a big, long strip of tape with a whole bunch of text on it. And when you type to it, you're stamping new stuff onto that tape. We pick it up and we put it back through the machine. And the machine goes, well, now that the tape that I'm seeing has your words on it, in addition to all the other stuff, I might add some different words. And I'm trained so that the words I add look like we're continuing a conversation. We're not. That's not what's happening, right? But it's so powerful at doing that we get all the outcomes that we see. But what that means is everything, we can't train the LLM unless you're going to spend millions, billions of bucks. You can't train the LLM. I'm not going to talk about fine tuning, right? For everybody on the call, you can't tune the LLM or retrain the LLM. That's one of the control levers, though. What goes into the LLM? The other control lever is the thing I'm pointing out with the tape. We have enormous control of the tape. We have control of the tape really in two ways. The user is potentially giving stuff that will go on the tape, but the much, much more powerful thing is everything we as the developer or the system architect or the BA, whatever you are, we, the owners of the implementation of the LLM, what we give permission for it to be able to grab and add to the tape as well. That process of adding things to the tape that didn't come from the user is a pretty practical definition of RAG, retrieval augmented generation. It's a pretty practical definition of grounding. All of these words that you've heard about scraping the knowledge base, they were the very first versions of quick, grab this other related stuff and whack it onto the tape, right? Now, we've done what we always do in tech. We've made up for a lot of lost time real quick, real fast in the sophistication of these machines, right? The tape editor, the context editor, the tools around how that works. You can imagine if I told you, think of it literally like those old pictures you have in your head of people editing old cinema tape. Right? They would snip the tape, they would cut it back together again, right? It's a good analogy because it's basically what we do in agentic level AI. We obsess over what is getting spliced into the tape in the next 500 milliseconds before it goes back into the God machine, right? And that engineering, that has become really very trivial because we've spent the last 15, 20 years building these really cool tools that work in millisecond time that fetch stuff from all over the planet, and they're called APIs, right? So the reason why this technology loves APIs and loves things like MCP protocol, which you've probably heard quite a bit about recently with MuleSoft, it's because that system, whether it's to bring back a result, bring back a document, or go do a thing and tell us it's done, it's a perfect fit for feeding this beast before the next second and the next run, right? And so this process of managing context, hence being a context engineer or a context manager, it also includes prompts. The little secret that not many people, I think, realize is the very, very first prompts, back when we had Instruct GPT and GPT-3, they were just typing into the LLM. There was no system prompt and developer prompt. It was just, hey, this weird thing talks to us now. See what happens. And what we found was if I give it instructions, sometimes it behaves like it understood the instructions. As they tuned it and tuned it and tuned it, what they realized was the very, very first part of the tape it sees each time, kind of like primacy and recency in human learning, it's really focused. It pays a lot of attention to this. And so they, as context engineers, the frontier providers, the OpenAIs, the Anthropics, the Geminis, they reserved that early chunk and said, the user doesn't get to talk to that until you, the developer, talk to it, and we, the owner, talk to it, right? So you get to load the system prompt with all of these special instructions before the human says something silly like, write me a haiku about cats, right? That process there where, okay, we're going to control the system logic, including what it can connect to, what it can see, querying a RAG database. That's what we're now saying is context engineering, because it's so much more than prompt. It includes prompt. Prompt is in there. And it includes instructions and topics when we're talking Agentforce language, but it also includes search indexes, vector databases and RAG databases. It includes all of that. It is every decision we mindfully make about how we feed the machine when it goes around the loop again. And all agentic behavior, it emerges from these principles. Whether you're using it to build just a simple chatbot or whether you are going for gold and going full autonomous, ultimately it boils down to our ability to determine what goes in to the context window, right? That's what you have to learn. And that's why I say it's cross-disciplinary, is that when you phrase it that way, you don't have to be the one who knows how to click the buttons in Agentforce or write the code to actually do the deposit into the context. You could be brilliant at managing a knowledge base and optimizing it subtly in a way that is designed now for a new type of user. If you've had a skill set that was great at optimizing a wiki so that call center users could use it, you probably have the skill set required to re-optimize it so that agentic users could use it, because it's really just the same technique, right? And the way this is then scaling in production is that you do this, you split it up. You don't have just one person do one product and go, here's the thing at the end. You begin to see this layering. You have to have this layered strategy around how we're managing tools. That's usually the easier one because enterprise grade solutions have kind of talked about tokens and credentials. But then we're talking about how do we manage data that's retrievable by the system? Do you only get to retrieve it based on the user who's using the system? Or does it get some type of super privilege, which is very dangerous, right? If it has that. But then we've got this other one, which is it's not data and it's not process, it's knowledge. It's coming from, it needs to know an answer to an applied context. And then you've got all the other fun stuff we love talking about, which is personality. If its purpose is to actually then talk to a human, particularly if it's to talk to a customer, we actually have to sit there and parameterize tone of voice and means of talking. And again, that kind of brings us into literally applied psychology and psychometrics, right? So you have this incredible horizon. That's why that word context is so powerful. The idea of engineering context, it's kind of like, you're building a virtual world for a little virtual person where we're designing almost doll houses, right, around these amazing little intellectual devices we've built. That toolkit is what Salesforce has had, like production certified and sitting there as the whole world is kind of waking up. And the first POCs I saw people using, I think one of the challenges is to the iPhoneification of tech, we all think we know ChatGPT is agents, is LLMs, it's a chatbot. And the interface you have when you're dealing with Agentforce, guess what? It's a chat window, right? And I saw people say, oh, this isn't as good as ChatGPT. And I'm like, it has the same interface, but what it's doing and what you can control is on a different order of magnitude to a chatbot, right? What it's doing is it's evaluating your needs in the context of your data, and it's coming up with a plan with the Atlas engine, and it's able to operate independently through multiple steps, self-evaluate, and then deliver back to you. The problem is that if you don't get why that's cool, then you as a consumer or someone learning the tech can look at it and go, why is this special compared to vanilla chatbot? Or even, like I hear all the time, old-fashioned chatbots, the ones that we just told them where they talked. And again, it's just You've had 18 months to suddenly learn the difference between, old chatbots and something which can potentially be completely autonomous, and where you have to focus on what you feed it, not just what it does.
So what does good look like now from a customer's perspective then for you? Because like this is all new, right? Yeah, and
Yeah.
I've watched some of your videos. We won't mention any names, but you were talking to a couple of clients saying, look, how did you get to where you're at already with this new technology, and how did you make the decision to? But all of this is new in terms of like context engineering, having the right structure, the right teams, the right security, the right safeguards. Everything is new. So like, what is good right now for a customer? And if we focus on Agentforce as a platform, but delivering a service to either internal or external users, what is good?
Well, I can tell you that I'm very grateful, like you said in some of the videos, to be working with some clients. I can mention names, working with people like the incredible Allegis Group and NPM Group, right? I can tell you that a common thread in these environments is that they've moved very quickly to a structured internal team approach, right? A multidisciplinary approach and a very practical hands-on approach to the technology. There is an inherent level of experimentation, and that's not a cop-out comment. Experimentation in these environments doesn't mean you can just do whatever you like. They have very, very focused objectives in terms of shipping, right? But what they look like on the inside of the business is something more like a product team than a traditional, PM with oversight of a product rollout. If you'd never seen Sales Cloud or Service Cloud or Marketing Cloud, and all you ever had was Force.com, if you'd never been shown any of the data models, and you then had to build everything that we know as the Salesforce platform, you would have needed a similar thing. You would have needed groups of people who had the understanding of data models, the understanding of processes, the understanding of security and technology, and then wrap it really tightly in very strong business alignment and business advocacy. But you could have done it. You could have built that team, and over time, they would have built out the long way a lot of this other stuff. It's a similar type of position. It's the realization that this is effectively a platform play. And so assembling a group of people that are still going to have these very specific objectives to ship, and to try and to test, but realize that what we're actually doing is truly foundational, right? The teams that I think are really killing it they're pushing themselves to not just implement the POC or the demo or the first build. They're pushing themselves as they do the first build to go, what does that process we just did look like written down? And how do I enshrine that now and say, that's kind of our V1 generative AI build strategy, right? It'll probably change heaps. It may be quite crap, right? But we're going to capture it. The fact that they recognize that they need to do that shows that they are recognizing the deeper thing going on, which is that no one's got this completely figured out. And I say that like all the time, having told you who I am and where I'm from. I still go, I'm not an expert in generative AI and agentics because I don't believe anyone can be yet. I'm humbled that people find my passion for something that's been a passion project, for many years, helpful and useful. But I have a deep respect for how complex these systems are by their implication, by their design. So I think claiming expertise this early in the cycle, I think that's part of the anti-pattern. And that comes back to, again, businesses, understandably, they have inertia around how they want to do tech, how they want to do digital. The businesses who approach it with more of a transformation mindset are doing better. The businesses who combine that then with an internal capability mindset, we're going to use this as an opportunity to build and teach, they are consistently the ones that are progressing. Because what we're seeing is that there are people who do the big dazzle POC and can fizzle and then try again and try again. These ones, they maybe didn't have, 8-week, 12-week release to market, huge big bang adoptions, right? But where they now are is a freight train. And they are releasing and releasing and releasing and releasing, and they are increasingly able to do things entirely internally because, like we said, very genuinely, the technology itself is actually not hard. It really isn't. Once you learn the new tools, most of what you can do with it, it is like a Lego kit. right? And when I say things like the knowledge matters, well, now we're talking about almost bespoke Lego, because your knowledge will genuinely be yours. It will be unique to your business. You won't be able to hire me as a consultant from any neck of the woods and expect me to arrive with a perfect facsimile of your true business reality. You're going to have a buy-in. That's just not true when rolling out a CRM, or when rolling out a banking system, or when rolling out a back office ticketing system. You absolutely can just rock up and go, you do you once I'm gone. I'm here to assemble the IKEA furniture, right? That's not what this is, at least not at this point. I'm sure we'll get there. In another couple of years, this is the new normal, and things will settle into a shape. But right here, right now, by its very virtue, it is a participative co-design process. And by the way, that's also why we are having the time of our lives, at Cloudwerx, because that idea of human-centered design, it's like deep in our DNA. It's literally part of what we do on everything with the Tesseract technique, is to make sure that, like, no matter what you're designing, from a page layout to a graph to a fully independent agentic system, incorporate, the hard-won learnings of the last 40, 50 years of human-centered design principles. Understand, because it will teach you, as the consultant, it will teach you some of that unique tapestry of the business, of the users in the business, of the language of the business. And you're going to have to do that, because what you're supplying this to, it behaves like a little user. It only knows what you feed it, right? You can't rely on assumptions. You're going to have to look at things from first principles, which, again, to come back to that point about, like, people who want to get started and want to work on a project, I go, this is also a beautiful time if you actually do really enjoy consulting, right? Actually, like all of us facing AI, we're asking ourselves, what are the skills that remain when some of the, if we're being honest, kind of low value, labory, technological, stuff starts to automate, right? And I think for consultants, or for people who do that type of, contractual project bounded work, it's going to come down to your skills and ability to do good old fashioned consulting, understanding business strategy, understanding change, understanding, business value realization, process modeling. Those skills aren't going away. Drawing the process diagram becomes trivial. Mm-hmm. Writing the metadata becomes trivial. Knowing what to draw and who to talk to figure that out, that's still a big thing.
What about the actual delivery side of a project then? Like, how does that change? So you mentioned, like, Sales Cloud, you go in, it's requirements gathering through to support, right? And agile, and the statement of work, and fixed price, and all of this stuff. Like, how do you deliver an agentic project?
Well, the way we do it, I mean, I'm a bit biased. We're very passionate and put a lot of work into really re-gearing the way to do technology projects. Customers tell us, I don't want to hire you so you can ask me what I should do. I kind of want you to tell me, right? So we have lots and lots and lots of reference architectures. We really pride ourselves, on reference process, reference architecture, and being able to come up and go, okay, here is what that should look like, and now let's customize it. Now let's vary it to you. But even when you have that, when you move into this pure agentic space, there's a limit to how much that will help you. You have to be, I have a problem saying agile in response to this conversation, because another area I'm very passionate about is the total breakdown in IT consulting to contractualize agile, because it was never meant to be. It's a product development methodology, not a consulting and contractual methodology, right? And so we wind up with these horrible things like agileful and, iterative. And so if I say, oh, it's got to be really agile, a whole bunch of people will go, oh yeah, we can totally do that. I'm like, no. I mean, actually agile. But part of the reason why I'm telling you, you need these cross-functional internal teams, is an internal team can be truly agile, because they're not subject to contractual obligation. They can do a dynamic backlog, and you're better off than having contractual instruments to support and augment that team as they make that journey. Because if what you try to do is say, here's a tightly parameterized SOW that makes you a whiz-bang service agent, it's a terrible idea for all the reasons we just said. And that's before we get into, which is probably not for this talk, for another day, but when we get into the realities of what it takes to create reliable generative outputs, that That's just not mathematically possible at this time. I cannot presuppose what your knowledge will do to the context window. I have to explore it with you. Now, we're good enough at it that we can give usually pretty good guardrail estimates, right? But we obsess over the knowledge, right? Whenever we're talking about, are we really going to go agentic with someone, the whole conversation is about knowledge. Not entirely about the data, not entirely about the process, but very focused on the knowledge. What's the knowledge state? And very focused as well on how much flow have you already got built, right? How many processes or APIs do you already have exposed? All of those things will de-risk it and will make it faster to get to the target, but it's still going to be, a mechano set. What I'm really doing is I'm saying, well, do I have Lego Technic or do I have Duplo? Right? Because that's going to totally change what we can build. I'm reasonably comfortable we can hang out in the, in the playground and get along building and rebuilding. But I don't want to get 3/4 of the way through the project that I thought was fine with Duplo, and then you tell me you need a really expensive Technic Lego set. I'm like, well, we're not going to just be able to magically make that. And I think that's I know I've encountered that is people say it tongue in cheek, but they half mean it. Won't the AI solve that for us, John? Yeah, if it's that clever, why not just do it? And that's why the literacy is so important, is to go, oh, it's brilliant. It's incredible. It's not some conscious entity sitting there being super clever. It's this totally stateless super machine, right? And so I'm sorry, it is limited by what we have to feed it. That doesn't mean everything if you wouldn't be in business if you didn't already have stuff to feed it that's perfectly serviceable. Hence my point about using that as a barrier, I don't buy. Right? You can use what you have, but knowing entirely how it's going to work from the outset, no, I think you've got to be ready to experiment and iterate. You've got to embrace some permissive structures, or you've got to be prepared to do quite a bit of initial discovery and assessment. And we have many clients that kind of do a bit of both, right? We're very into doing, on larger stuff, maybe we do a bit of parallel. Maybe we identify quickly areas that we can just move and start to get the muscle memory while we do a deeper dive for the stuff that we know is going to come sequentially. But even the way I'm talking, that sounds like a transformation initiative. That sounds like a digital program with multiple streams. That doesn't sound like rolling out Sales Cloud, right? That doesn't sound like strictly parameterized chunks of technology slotting into place. That sounds like a change program, right? And that's exactly what it is. It feels more like a digital program than rolling out the next piece of tech.
So for I guess final thoughts and comments, for anyone on the implementation side in the Salesforce world, just because that's our audience, right? People that are highly capable at the moment of implementing Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, but they're taking on board what you're saying and the shift in the market and where we're going, and they're looking to upskill and refocus in order to become, I guess, highly capable of delivering agentic-based solutions. Consulting skills absolutely are key, but where else? What, like, from an education standpoint, like what's the focus?
So the very first thing is you need to understand how an LLM works as a service endpoint, right? If you want to understand how it works mathematically, rock on. And I encourage you to do it, but there's no way I can sugarcoat that one. That gets into pretty hardcore algebra fast. And I think a lot of education material out there goes straight over that cliff very quickly. And I don't think that helps a Trailblazer. And so I kind of caution and go, no, too far. Understand how the LLM works as a service, the way you would understand the rules of a formula field in force.com. And hence why I try to teach it like a mechanism instead of teaching it like maths, is that if you understand what I'm saying about the tape, you can go and prove it to yourself. Boot up your favorite LLM and play with, preferably in one of the interfaces where you can see a bit more of the back end, right? Sign up. They're usually free. Sign up for, a developer account with a major frontier model and actually see what happens when you change a word, when you change, a sentence, when you change dot points. Because if you do that, what you're learning is how to manipulate the outcomes of the machine using this much more organic input. And you will start to, what I'm trying to do is to break down this idea. If you go, oh, well, it's non-deterministic, which by the way, they're not. We make them non-deterministic through the way they are implemented, right? But they don't have to inherently be that. They're becoming that because of the scale of how they're implemented. But if you told me I had to learn force.com, and we don't know how anything works. Sometimes it thinks it's a pigeon, right? You'd be forgiven for just throwing your hands up in the air and just giving up. So that obviously isn't the truth. And people telling you that's the truth, they're probably not helpful to you. You have to reach for something that begins to tell you, yes, okay, they have vast variety in what they can do. But in the context of, say, sales, service, and marketing, I can get quite comfortable pretty quickly. And Salesforce has a heap of great material on this with Prompt Builder, with their agent templates to help you play with what happens when I steer the outcome slightly differently. If you do that first, then when you go, right, now do that in Prompt Builder, you'll immediately see it differently. You'll be like, this thing is it's a context machine where I can drag and drop variables. That's what you're telling me, John. You're telling me this thing's basically a prompt builder. It builds this big string, but I don't have to think of it like a system prompt. I could make it, some of the things we put in Prompt Builder are huge. We put in enormous amounts of additional RAG information and contextual data to help it form a nuanced view of the customer it's looking at. If you master that, you can then see Agentforce for what it really is. Agentforce then goes, now imagine you could abstract all of that. Imagine if I could hold 6, 7, 8, 12, 200 prompt templates. And not only that, if you tell me to configure it the right way, I can interleave them, right? I can combine them because certain conditions were met. Okay, I'm going to give you that specific type of agentic response. It's going to be these particular behaviors, and it's going to be this particular knowledge, and it's going to be with this particular product type. And then if the conversation immediately goes somewhere else, I can recompile it as well. Right? I think about the agentic systems in Agentforce as a product as like that. That's like when you're sitting there looking at those old pictures of like an industrial loom in a cotton mill, right? It's actually the exact same tech as someone at home spinning yarn on a spinning wheel. It is exactly the same, but all that's happened is the industrial scale of it has required us to copy it out many times and to create new mechanisms that move back and forward between the mechanisms. But that type of additive system layering, that's well known to Trailblazers. That's how you level up your understanding of the Salesforce ecosystem. And so if you take that thread, yes, still do your Trailhead modules, still do your learning pathways, but there's a piece missing. I'm doing my bit to try and help fill it in. There's other people on the internet. Check out this new thing called context engineering. It's emerging everywhere to try and align these ideas that helps you see the wood for the trees, that helps you step back and go, there's something happening here that isn't just about config, right? It's not even just about learning a code language. It's about how I think about the assembly of information before it goes into that machine. And building your comfort with that will allow you to then, I think, build bigger and bigger, more advanced architectures. And you'll understand why Agentforce is what it is. Yes, it will then look to the user like a chatbot that you're talking to, but the first time you see it do 9 things without any input sequentially that perfectly problem solve something you didn't have to hard code it to do, right? Which I do routinely in my little demos. That's when you usually go, oh, I get it now. Yeah. I don't have to hard code 100 different processes. I can teach it how to use the ingredients and it'll solve all of them, right? Very, very powerful. I think that's going to be, I actually think Trailblazers, knowing and loving them as I do as a community, that I got to join when I did in my life. I think, man, like Agentics and generative AI is built for us. It is built for us. You can speak in your native language. The barrier for you to play with it has just evaporated, and its value is all in your ability to understand the business. If that doesn't describe exactly trailblazing, if that doesn't describe exactly what it is to kind of be a Salesforce admin, I don't know what does. So I think it's an amazing time for the ecosystem.
That's a really positive note to end on. I think people will be pleased to hear. But if anyone wants to reach out and pick your brains, see some of your content, where do you typically hang out online other than?
Yeah, totally. I mean, so we're going deep into YouTube. I really encourage you to check out the Cloudwerx YouTube channel. Amazing stuff there, particularly around Agentforce. I've got my own channel as well, obviously, that I'm trying to do some of this foundations of LLM stuff, which will then also go into Agentforce. Once we build up to it, we'll talk a bit more about agentic design. We're obviously regularly commenting on LinkedIn. And I would also encourage you to, look across YouTube at this, context engineering concept. and because it's brand new and it is kind of, aligning to a lot of these thoughts. And also just Salesforce is doing a good job in how it's talking about how to think about agents, how to think about Agentforce, check out the new materials and publications that they're producing, and try to, if you are feeling either jaded by all the information and all the releases, or you're struggling to get a handle, try to come back to that fundamental idea. Make it mechanistic. Refuse to accept that you can't predict or anticipate how it's going to behave, and come back to the idea of that there is a way to do that, and there are some concrete things I can do, and take that power back. There'll be videos you can watch and people you can find that will help you understand, if you're stuck on a leap from one idea to the next, there will be answers for that. It doesn't just have to be a big black box.
Thank you so much, John. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure our audience are going to love hearing from you. So thank you so much.
Appreciate it, Ben. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure.